Wonderful story of love. Tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love. With the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it. Shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. 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 Though you are far away. Wonderful story of love. Still he doth call today. Calling from Calvary's mountain, down from the crystal bright fountain, e'en from the dawn of creation. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful.
So why does this matter? Why in a school setting and I don't know that they do this anymore. I really don't, but they used to when I was a kid. Why did they demand that you call your teacher Mr. Smith or Miss Smith?
Sign of respect. The same idea.
Okay, it is a sign of respect, but does it hurt anything to not say Miss or Mr.? Well, okay, that's a good place to start the discussion. When I say ma'am or sir, when I say Mr. or Mrs., when I say doctor, am I saying that person is better than me? Maybe, maybe not.
Usually it's to right? Like teacher, whether it's a college class or a kindergarten class.
Doesn't matter.
For that class, right? And so Miss Smith, kindergartners or whatever. It's, yes, good morning, Miss Smith. Yes, Miss Smith, or whatever. And so it's like they're not only being respectful, but they're acknowledging that now they're under the authority.
Okay, so it's a role thing. That measure of respect is extremely important because it communicates something and it fosters something. If I am speaking respectfully to people, what am I also more likely to do?
Listen.
Okay.
As a junior high teacher, as the years have gone through, it's become extremely frustrating to me because, of course, I believe this firmly. And when the teachers that teach next to me and
They tell the kids they call them whatever they want to.
Miss, bro, Mr. I'm like, that's Mr. So and so. And I correct, all of my students know.
Right.
I'm Miss Ansel, end of discussion, period. And they know that. And even the students next door that I've said, well, that's Mr. Tom or whatever. They do, but you see the difference in the classroom because they haven't set a tone for the classroom management with the students. So the students are thinking, okay, this person has something that I need to hear, I need to pay attention, whatever.
Right. And ultimately, and let's make sure I'm not getting too far ahead. Yeah, I'm not. Ultimately, using that language of respect increases the likelihood that you will actually have respect. And it increases the likelihood that the people around you will have respect.
Mike, would you say, I'm thinking two things. the humility and the submission.
Dad, we don't like that submission word.
Dr. Bradford's class, and I would call him Dr. Bradford. I'm submitting to him, not him as an individual, but his position. And by saying that, that form of respect is saying between him and I submit to your teaching because I'm a pupil of yours. I'm not the teacher. So I'm submitting out of humility and showing you the respect that you deserve. An analogy of the blasphemous thing and the submission, what we're looking at is it's almost the same thing. It's a submission to God through humility by giving him that respect. And all, like you said, the others would see that and possibly understand that that's what it's all about.
Okay.
Because you can't go in Dr. Bradford, sorry, Dr. Bradford's class, being all saying, and I never have any degree in music and say, well, you're wrong. That's not how you do that.
Oh, you can. People do it all the time.
But then I would be blaspheming his position because I didn't submit and I didn't humble myself. And all those around me are going to look at me and won't respect me, like you're saying. But if I went in there and submitted,
there is an aspect of that I think that you hit on that's correct. All the other people won't necessarily respect you, but more importantly, by me showing him respect, the likelihood of other people around is that they will show him respect. It creates an atmosphere of respect. By the way, it usually returns back to you. When you show respect, something else happens. You generally get respect shown back to you. But that also just makes the point that actually using the language helps generate the reality of respect. And what this is really about is lacking respect for God. Not just not saying things respectfully. Now, I'll give you a illustration that some people give certain classes in certain circumstances an exemption from this idea, and comedy is one of those places. And so there are a lot of comedy troupes, very well known comedy troupes out there who are famously known for being irreverent. Obviously, their comedic use of this irreverency is not intended to convey their actual personal feelings about God. However, the proliferation of the irreverent comedy does foster an atmosphere in society where the level of reverence for God drops, or the level of reverence for the government drops, or the level. And so comedians often argue that comedy gives you a pass on these things. And I would argue that it probably doesn't. And that if the only way that I can find to be funny and make people laugh is to be disrespectful to others, then I'm probably not really that funny. I should be able to find a way to be funny without being irreverent and disrespectful to God, to those in authority, to other people. Reverence is, or this whole discussion has led certain groups, historically, stereotypically at least, our understanding of Jews and Muslims both, of taking the position of what? In order to not be irreverent in the use of God's name, we're just going to do what? We're not going to say it at all. We're not going to utter the name to make certain that we don't misuse the name and that it's improper But let me ask you a question. Let's apply that reasoning to some other things. Do we honor God's word by refusing to read it? Or do we honor it by reading it carefully? And so if you take that and you go, well, obviously, if you don't read it at all, you don't have any respect for it. So you need to read it and read it carefully. That shows that you respect it. Well, let's apply that to the name question. Is not using God's name respectful? No, there are actually times that you need to use God's name. And you should use God's name. And I'll even throw in there you're commanded to use God's name. But that's another story. It is using it carefully that shows respect. Do we honor the Lord's Supper by never eating it? Or do we honor it by discerning his body when we do eat it? I would argue that we do not honor God's name by refusing to speak it. We honor God's name by speaking it reverently. Truthfully, worshipfully, thankfully, faithfully, properly. Yes, sir.
Say, and perhaps even myself, now that I'm thinking about it, God is not his name.
It is not. It's his nature.
So what is his name?
Eh, hold on for a minute. It's not even really his nature, because divine is actually his nature. But
Israelites knew his name in the Hebrew, and they used his name in the sense of Mike or Leo and Elohim or Jehovah. You see what I'm saying? And so the technicality I'm thinking of is, okay, can you just say, oh well, like Karen was saying earlier, oh my God, OMG. Is that using his name? Or is that just, you see what I'm saying?
yeah.
So
And my answer to that question is yes, because that is what we use that word for. And that's the common understood meaning of that word. And here's something I want you to consider, though. When I blaspheme him, when I use his name irreverently, when I speak evil against him, however you want to define this, does it diminish God when I misuse his name? Doesn't diminish him at all. He's still exactly what he is. His holiness is unchanged. His glory is not diminished in the least. What changes? Our perception of his glory, our perception of his holiness, our perception of his nature. So when God gives this commandment, don't use my name in vain, and he gives this commandment, don't blaspheme my name, that the consequences of doing that is going to be severe. I'm going to demand that your life be taken if you do that. He is doing that for our own good, so that we do not diminish our view of him, so that we don't fail to appreciate who he is. He is our creator.
Well, also in turn, it's not only our connection, it's the people around us.
Absolutely. In fact, that's the next place I'm going. So I appreciate you bringing it up. Turn to Ezekiel 36. Just 2 verses there is all we're going to look at. But Ezekiel 36, 22 and 23. And let's read these together. And I want you to see exactly what she just said. Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I am about to act, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations to which you came. I want you to understand what's going on here. He says to them, what I'm fixing to do to you is not for you. What I'm fixing to do to you is because of what you've done to my name, the way that you have profaned my name among the nations. What does that word profane mean? I'm sorry? Okay, to make common? To not be respectful? The same thing that we've been defining irreverent or blaspheme to be? You have profaned my name among the nations to which you came, and I will vindicate the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, and which you have profaned among them. Listen to the next one, the next statement. And the nations will know that I am the Lord. See, the way that they had spoken about God had caused the foreign nations around them to not know that he was God. And he said, what I'm fixing to do is for the purposes of demonstrating my holy name, of vindicating the holiness of my name, so that those people will know that I am the Lord, declares the Lord God, when through you I vindicate my holiness before their eyes. He's fixing to judge them. And he says that when he does that, the people around them are going to realize that God is holy and that God is the Lord. What that means is our use of language when we talk about God impacts the way the people around us view our God. Maybe the reason we're not as effective at evangelism as we once were is because we are not as reverent in our speaking of holy things as we once were. Maybe we've bought into the commonness of a discussion about God. And we bought into I believe, the devil's lie that there's nothing in a name. With all due respect to Shakespeare, who believed that a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet, names matter. Did you have a comment? It has become much too casual. And because of that, people don't respect God. We don't. You know why we don't call it out? Because a lot of times we're guilty of it ourselves. It's awful hard to call somebody out on something when we ourselves do it. The way we speak about God impacts the way we and others around us view God, and that is why this is so important. That's why it matters. As we move on in this chapter, unless somebody has any more comments or questions about those things.
TV personality or somebody on TV saying the man upstairs.
Which is a terribly irreverent way to address God. It's just disrespectful. Verses 17 through 22 is about equal justice. And that was not an invention of the United States. The one who takes human life shall surely be put to death. He says in verse 17, if a man takes the life of any human being, he shall surely be put to death. Now, this is the same thing as thou shalt not murder, as one of the 10 commandments that was given back in Exodus. It's the same thing as the pronouncement after the flood, which is how long this rule's been in effect. You'd think they would know about it already, because it's been in effect all the way back since after the flood, when Noah was told, if anybody takes a human life, by man shall his blood be shed, because man is made in the image of God. And by the way, that carries it to another, to me, an interesting level. The suggestion is that by my taking the life of something that's made in God's image, that's being disrespectful to God. And that's why there's a connection here. There's not a break in subject matter. This subject flows naturally from the discussion about the use of his name because it's all about respecting God. The one who kills an animal, the one who takes the life of an animal shall make it good, life for life. Who do the animals belong to? God. If a man injures his neighbor, just as he has done, so shall it be done to him. Now this starts getting interesting. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, just as he has injured a man, so it shall be inflicted on him. So that's the principle that's laid out here. Restitution, verse 21, is made for animals. Death is required for murder. That's repeated again in verse 21. One standard for judgment applies. This is the important part here. There shall be one standard for you. It shall be for the stranger as well as the native. I am the Lord your God. Now, I think that there shall be one standard for you. It shall be for the stranger as well as for the native. Cuts both ways. And what I mean by that is this. This is not just saying if a stranger is in your land and he kills somebody, that the stranger is to be put to death. Or if the stranger is in your land and he kills your livestock, that he has to make restitution for your livestock. That's not just saying that. It's also saying to Israel that if a stranger is in your land and you take his life, this applies. Or you do harm to his animal, this applies. There is one standard and it cuts both directions. For the stranger and for the native. And there's an important lesson in that because God is the God of all mankind. So when we're talking about high moral law, it didn't apply to some people and not to others. That's a mistake that people try to make even to this very day. There's all sorts of immoral behavior going on and people say, well, they're not a Christian, so they're not obligated to respect those things. Yes, they are. Because he's their God just like he's our God. He's their creator just like he's our creator. There is one standard. Moses spoke to the sons of Israel. Oh, let's stop there. Let's talk about this for a little bit more, kind of expand this a little bit. Why did he do this, that injury is answered proportionately thing? If you injure someone's eye, then it costs you an eye. If you break someone's bone, then it costs you a broken bone. If you cut off their foot, then your foot get one. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, fracture for fracture. What is that really about? I mean, to us, that sounds like kind of a cruel system. So if I do something and cause Ethan's arm to get broken, this says the judgment for me is what? They break my arm. Would we consider that humane? Look, we don't even whip people anymore. We don't even spank our children anymore. And by we, I'm using the collective we, not the individual we.
Talking about your home and all this. It's about making someone whole. You took away their wholeness, so you can no longer be whole. In the sense of the way God designed us.
Interestingly enough, it is actually not cruel. It's actually limiting and controlling human punishment. If you go back to Genesis 4, what is often called the Song of Lamech, in verse 23 and 24. And Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, listen to my voice, you wives of Lamech, give heed to my speech, for I have killed a man for wounding me. God says, no. You don't kill somebody for wounding you. the punishment's got to be proportional. I've killed a man for wounding me and a boy for striking me. If you hit me in the nose, I don't get to kill you for it. But that is the way we think. Listen to what he says. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, this goes back to earlier in the chapter, in his ancestor Cain, who was turned loose into the world and who was afraid that he would be killed by people because he was excluded by God. God says, no, I'm going to protect you. If anybody does anything to you, I'm going to revisit upon him sevenfold. And that was clearly had to be distributed and made known among people so people knew, leave him alone. That was God's, I'm going to protect you and this is how I'm going to protect you. And what I really think God was saying is I will protect you. I will mete out perfect justice for anything that's done to you, sevenfold. But he says if Cain is avenged sevenfold, then I'm avenged 77-fold. What about Lamech's son? Well, if dad's avenged 77-fold, then I'm avenged 77 times 2, 114, 100, whatever that number comes up to. That is the way human beings do. And so by the time we get to the New Testament, and we get to passages like Matthew 18, and sometimes people miss the echo here. Matthew 18, 21 and 22, Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Cain. And Jesus said, I did not say you up to 7 times, but up to 77 times. Lamech. So there's echo here. And what's going on here is Lamech is saying, I'm going to be vengeful and demand 77 times more from you than what you do to me. And Jesus says, no, you need to extend 77 times more forgiveness than what someone does to you. So what Jesus is doing here is turning this attitude completely on its head and saying that we should not be about extracting our pound of flesh, but rather we should be about forgiving even more. If you go back to the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5 and verse 38 and following, and I'm just about out of time, but I'll wait for the kids to come walking in. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Now he's making a direct reference to the passage we just read. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist him who is evil, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. And whoever shall force you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. What is Jesus saying? He's saying you missed the whole point of the law. The whole point of the law was to keep people from doing unjust responses and to limit those responses. And they missed the point of the law. They were using it as an excuse and a justification for harming others. And he says, no, you got it all backwards. All right, I have to stop. But I'll say it by saying this, or I'll conclude this by saying this. This ends with the Lord's declaration, I am the Lord your God. I think that's Charlie.
Wonderful story of love, tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love, with the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it, shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love.